Ambassador Bolton, thank you very much for joining us. Over the years, you and I have spoken and you've been incredibly critical of Donald Trump. I just want to get your reaction to how things have unfolded, not just throughout the week, but especially over the course of the last 24 hours.
Well, I think Trump made the right decision for the United States in attacking the Iranian nuclear weapons program. I thought we should have done this for many years ago, up to 20 years, maybe even more. But it's better that it comes now than not at all or too late. I do think that there's plenty of work to do. I don't think anybody really believes that it's over on day one. And I think part of the problem that remains was caused precisely by Donald Trump agreeing to 60 days of negotiation with the Ayatollah Khamenei, during which time the regime, duplicitous as ever, was moving whatever it could out of places like Natanz and Esfahan and Fordo. So negotiation time is always on the side of the nuclear proliferator, and that appears to be proven here again today.
Big questions being asked about the day after and whether Donald Trump asked those questions and whether he got the response that he wanted. I'm currently here in Israel speaking to Israeli officials, and they did question the idea of Donald Trump not wanting this to be a prolonged war that, goes into him asking, well, what happens in a year? He wants to know what happens the day after, the week after, because he doesn't necessarily want to drag the United States into a war that breaks out in the Middle East. But do you feel that perhaps the United States is already in it?
Well, I don't think it's because Donald Trump doesn't want a long war that he asks the questions you've described. It's because he has a short attention span. And the fact is, if you're determined to destroy the nuclear program, which I think is the right thing to do, anybody else would understand that it may take more time. I personally think there are other objectives. I think that the only potential foundation for lasting peace and security in the Middle East is the overthrow of the Ayatollahs, which Trump has already said is not one of his objectives. I think it should be.
But is that wishful thinking? Because whatever we think about in terms of how Iran has perhaps miscalculated the last week, or it's more vulnerable, or it's weakened, it is a serious player. It's still a serious state. And this regime is deeply embedded and ingrained. No matter how corrupt or brutal or oppressive it may be, it is the regime of Iran. And should it not be up to the Iranian people to decide that?
Well, I'm counting on the Iranian people. I think this regime is at the weakest point it's ever been since the revolution of 1979. I think things like economic dissatisfaction, going back to the riots, which took place all over the country in 2018 and 2019. The young people, who constitute 60% of the population, is under 30. The young people know they can have a different way of life than under the Ayatollahs. They can see it right across the Gulf in places like Abu Dhabi and Doha and Dubai. The ethnic groups, the Azeris, the Kurds, the Baluchis, the Arabs, all very dissatisfied with the Ayatollahs. And going back to 2 years ago with the demonstrations that occurred after the Mahsa Amini murder, a young Kurdish woman who violated the dress code, this reflects the 50% of the population that's female, very unhappy, not just with the dress code, but with the whole idea, the whole legitimacy of the regime, that the Ayatollahs speak the word of God, not on dress codes, apparently. So I think this regime is vulnerable, and now they face a very, very hard decision that could fragment both the military and the Ayatollahs, which is how do they respond to the U.S. attacks on the nuclear sites.
Do you think, just as the phrase mission accomplished went on to haunt George W. Bush after the invasion of Iraq, the idea of one and done may haunt this administration?
Well, it won't haunt me. Mission accomplished was right on Iraq because the main mission was the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, and that worked. I don't think Trump has exactly said one and done.
The state of But the state of Iraq went into total disarray. We saw the dismantling of the Ba'athist Party. I mean, I don't necessarily want to go into the history of Iraq, but then we saw what
The
Al
American
Qaeda and ISIS
strategic
did to the
objective,
country.
yeah, the American strategic objective was the overthrow of Saddam Hussein and the elimination of any possibility Iraq could resume the search for weapons of mass destruction, nuclear, chemical, and biological, and that happened.
Well, there weren't any nuclear weapons, and that's the question here that so
But
many
this
are
is,
now
yes, here's a
asking
very
in
important
terms.
point. I'm glad you raised that. I'm very glad you raised that because today, people who oppose the American attack are saying, but you can't eliminate the knowledge that the Iranian scientists have. That is exactly right. And that is precisely the concern that the Bush administration had on the nuclear front with Saddam Hussein, who after the first Gulf War, when it was found he was much further advanced on nuclear weapons than anybody had expected, kept together 3,000 nuclear scientists and technicians that he called his nuclear mujahideen, who could rebuild the Iraqi program. That's why his regime had to be overthrown, and it's why this regime has to be overthrown.
So are you saying then that what you see is a prolonged American approach to this, where they just continue to strike, on Iranian targets, something that was perhaps a red line before, that's gone?
Well, I have no idea what Donald Trump is going to do. His objective was to get on leading the right parade. He wanted to make sure he was on the prevailing side because, as we know, Donald Trump is always a winner. What he'll do tomorrow is anybody's guess.
Ambassador Bolton, we're grateful for your time. Thank you very much.